for years and years and years when I was coaching at Mounds View High School. And I would probably still be attending it if it weren't for just the challenges of my practice schedule and my meet schedule often making it impossible for me to be here for this, right? I have a meet tomorrow, so I can't come for day 2. Otherwise, I would love to come and just sit and watch, because I find that a lot of the most interesting stuff that I see is coming out of high school coaches, because you're dealing with the toughest constraints, right? You've got the shortest season, and then you've got winter shortening the amount of time that you have, and then softball and baseball want that gym real bad, so you got to figure out what to do with the hallways, and oh, you get 20 minutes in the gym. And I really think that the most interesting stuff is coming out of high school, right? And so a little bit about me, and maybe this makes my bias clear, right? I'm formally trained as a high school teacher. I was an English teacher. You'll see that come out in this slideshow where there's about 1 billion slides and I've over-prepared, and now all of a sudden, like, oh, I can't get through this in an hour, what am I gonna do, right? Please, the slides are shared, the video's gonna go up. Please go back and take a look at it, because I know there's some slides that I'm gonna blast through that maybe we wanna go back to for some time on your own time. And I would strongly encourage that, because I learned a lot just making this, right? And it's my sincere hope that it's helpful to you, because I frequently found myself going to clinics like this at the national level and going, God, this guy coached a national champion and he's not telling me anything. He's just saying random, like, oh yeah, you gotta run fast. Thanks, right? So I tried to put a lot of stuff in this, knowing that I couldn't quite cover all of it, but that it would be there for you to look at in the future, okay? Plus, for those of you way in the back, I don't know how well you're gonna be able to see everything. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, all right, so we'll get going here. There's the agenda. I normally say things like you can read, so I'm not gonna read it for you, but if you're all the way in the back, maybe you can't read it. The big thing that's important to me and that I want you to walk away from feeling here is that you can consider your athletes' current development and design training based on where they're at. Because I find that all my time in coaches education, it was all written by the coaches of Division I and elite athletes. I don't work with those kids, right? So that training does me nothing unless I figure out how to scale it down to where my kids are at, and even then, it may not be appropriate for them at that age. Now, as I said, I'm a former English teacher, right? So what would a presentation from a former English teacher be if I don't have an overarching extended metaphor, right? So for this one, our overarching extended metaphor is toothpaste, right? And I say this because I think about athletes kind of like a tube of toothpaste. When you get a fresh tube, you can push down anywhere and toothpaste comes out. It's easy. When you get a new kid who hasn't done a lot of athletics, you can do just about anything and get results. But then after a couple years, they start to look like this tube of toothpaste. I can't just push down anywhere and have toothpaste come out anymore. I need to be more strategic about the activities that I'm picking, and I need to be thoughtful about where is the toothpaste all used up and where is some of that hiding, right? So that's what I'm talking about. How can you see your athlete and figure out where that toothpaste is still hiding, okay? So first thing I want to talk about is this idea of transfer of training. That's essentially just, hey, how are the activities that I'm doing transferring to the event itself? Am I even pushing down on the tube at this point? Or did I miss it and I got the floss, right? Because the long jump, despite being a fairly simple event and fairly straightforward, has a lot of different places to invest your time and energy, right? You can go technique, speed, strength, and there's tons of programs that apply all kinds of different things and different combinations of these things, and that's fine. There's different times to apply different things, but when do you do that? Both in terms of the season and in terms of this athlete's 4-year career with you, okay? So this guy, this delightful old Russian man, is Anatoly Bondarchuk. He was the former Soviet throws coach, and he was like the head guy, right? For the Soviet Union, everybody reported up to him. And what he did was he tried to answer that question of which activities are the most meaningful and at what level. So what he did was kind of brilliant. He sent questionnaires to athletes of various abilities, from like 16-foot long jumpers all the way up to women jumping 23 feet. Sent them all over the world for 4 Olympic cycles, so 16 years. And he took those tests and he correlated them to their performances, right? So if you are A 16-foot long jumper, how well does your flying 30 time predict your performance? How well does your jump from a short run-up predict your performance? And so I put this in here. I know if you're way in the back, you probably can't see all of it, but please, again, check the slides online. It's right there for you. There's two ways to read this. We can go across and read as I improve from a 16 to 18 foot, 18 to 20, 20 to 21, blah, blah, blah. What is the significance as I get better, right? So if we look at something like a barbell snatch, when you are a 16-foot long jumper, it's got some significance. As you get better, that significance drops a lot to the point where it doesn't even really matter anymore, right? So we can read each of these activities going across, or we can read going down vertically. We can go, all right, if I'm a 16-foot long jumper trying to become an 18-foot long jumper, where is the biggest bang for my buck, right? So the closer, if we're talking about those R values and that correlation, the closer it gets to 1, the more significant that correlation, the better a predictor that is of success. The further it gets away from 1, and the closer it gets to -1, the less likely it is to be impactful, or it might even be negatively impactful. So what we do is, if we break this up, we start to see there's different tests that target different qualities. So a flying 30 is a great example of absolute speed, right? What is the highest speed you can reach regardless of how long it takes you, right? The barbell snatch is a classic measurement of power. How fast can you move a heavy load, right? The half squat is a classic test of just strength, okay? So what we can then do is we can break these down and say, all right, where are the qualities that truly matter if we're talking about speed, if we're talking about whatever. So the jump from the short approach makes for a good starting point. Right here, this dotted line, that's where it starts to become significant. Anything below that, it probably doesn't have a great effect. It may have a negative effect, right? But that's if we're getting way down below 0, that it gets negative. Anything right in here is just like, I don't know, you're doing it, but I don't think it really helped anything. It just didn't hurt. So short jumps start right here around 0.8, and they work their way up, right? Makes sense. You want to be a good jumper, you got to jump. Nothing too interesting about that. They get more important as time goes on, right? It's nothing groundbreaking, but it's a good starting point. If we look at speed, there's our flying 30. There's our measure of absolute speed. There's our 30-meter acceleration. There's our 60, which is kind of our combo of a 30-meter acceleration and a flying 30. And there's our 100, right? So they're all kind of important, but your flying 30 kind of is your biggest bang for your buck, and it only gets more important as time goes on. So we take away from that, probably need to focus on max velocity, right? That's probably your most important quality for a jumper. We also probably, unless you are cool pulling your hair out every time they miss the board, we probably want to steady those acceleration mechanics, because that's obviously incredibly important. But then this 100-meter time, it just kind of hovers there around 0.7, right? Whereas everything else seems to be getting more important, that one just kind of hangs out. So we can infer that bang for your buck, acceleration and max velocity. If we're talking multi-jumps, I'll just kind of blast through this part real quick. This one up here is what we call a 10-fold bound from place. Essentially, that's just jump and then bound left, right, left, right, left, right 10 times, right? How far did you go? How good of an indicator of your jump ability is that? Okay, so we can infer from that that we like these elastic bounding tests that have lots of reps associated with them. So you don't just pop a one off, right? You get a lot of that stuff. All right, and here's our strength test, right? And as someone like me who's dedicated a lot of his life to strength and conditioning, I saw that dotted line pop up way up there with all this space beneath it, and I went, oh no, I spent a lot of money figuring out how to do something that maybe is of questionable significance, right? Right here is our barbell snatch. That's our classic test of power, right? Once you are in this 18-foot to 20-foot range, it drops off real fast. Here's our strength test. Starts here and then works its way up to a little bit more relevance. And then here's our med ball toss stuff. I don't know what's going on there, right? It's crazy. So it makes you question, what is the relevance of strength within our event? How great a predictor is it? And maybe all that effort that we go to work hard in the weight room and get really sore is just taking away from where we should be emphasizing speed. Okay? I would say, especially, so this starts out as a 16-foot long jumper, we do need to do some work to track it backwards over to where our athlete truly is. My guess is that this trends this way and power becomes of increasing importance, and max strength trends down and eventually becomes a place of not true significance. Those are things I just said. Okay, so let's put it all in together into reasonable progressions, right? And key performance indicators. So for technique, we know it's important. It only gets more important. We're keeping a steady diet of jumping, right? We're talking technique. Speed, we're focusing on max velocity and acceleration during those early years of training, and we're hitting that hard. We're not worried about ripping 150s, right? That speed endurance doesn't matter. Strength, we're focusing on power. We're focusing on moving loads fast. We're not focusing on moving super heavy things, because the ability to move a load fast is probably more significant in those early stages of development. And as that gets better, maybe then we start transitioning to strength. But I will say, the moment when strength surpasses power happened at about 20 feet. Our state record for women's long jump is 20 feet 1 inch, right? So the greatest long jumper our state has ever seen was just getting to the point where max strength mattered a lot. Food for thought. Multi-jump training should be introduced early and remain consistent throughout the entire program. This is big to me, right? There's this persistent myth out there that like, oh, you have to be able to squat X amount of your body weight before you do plyos. Just flat out not true, right? You can do plyos right away, super early. Watch small children jumping around, they're doing fine, right? And then endurance, again, it's of very little significance. My athletes don't do a lot of 100s or 150s or 200s with short rest, right? Especially at the early levels. There's just other places I'd rather spend their energy. So speed and elastic ability are the bang for your buck. Today we're talking technique and speed because, frankly, I don't have a lot of time to talk about all 5 of those other things. I'll talk about those other things in other presentations, but this is only an hour and it's already been 15 minutes. So that's what we're talking about. Acceleration, max velocity, and then key technical landmarks. Those are the things that I am watching most closely for a long jumper. So first piece, let's talk a little bit about the early approach, the acceleration portion of the approach. I know a lot of coaches love to use the word like, I need you to drive forward. It's the drive phase. It's blah, blah, blah. I've stopped using that word because it's got weight. Again, former English teacher, I don't use that word. It's got too much baggage for me, right? I don't know what drive has meant for them in the past. So I've started using this idea of pressure. I want them to create pressure forward during that run. My athletes often describe the sensation as, it feels like someone is kind of pushing behind me and I'm just trying as hard as I can to stay ahead of that push. So we talk a lot about those early steps. You're creating pressure forward, and as the sprint goes on, you get more upright and you're continuing to try and stay ahead of that pressure, right? Because if you pop up a little too early, the pressure lets off and then you're just kind of a sewing machine going up and down really fast but not really going anywhere. That's significant. So I know what you're thinking right now, right? Like, pressure, how am I supposed to explain that to a kid? You're right, it doesn't make any sense, it's too abstract. So when they're first learning, I talk a lot about going from long to short ground contact times. Those early steps, we want to be thinking about hit the ground, work the ground, and push yourself forward, right? I often use the example of like a scooter or a skateboard. When you first start, right, I'm on my skateboard and, oh God, this is high stakes. The first push, I have all day to work the ground, right? Because I'm not going anywhere. So I can really get a good, long, full push to get that momentum going. After that, I get going faster. I have less and less time the faster I go. So that ground contact needs to get shorter and shorter and shorter. So we talk a lot about those ground contact times need to go from long to short and get you going forward. And the first thing an athlete does after I say that is they go, okay, I'm going to do this, coach, and they step back and then they bound as far as they can for about 20 meters, and it looks awful and it becomes really inconsistent on their runway, right? Because bounding, by its very nature, lets off that pressure, right? It stops your momentum. Think about if I put a sled behind me and I start bounding, I'm gonna feel great while I'm in the ground. And as soon as I clear the ground and I'm in the air, that sled is gonna stop me, and it's gonna drop me right back down, and I'll do start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. I need to be building momentum with each step. So I follow that up very quickly with, no. While we have ground contact times going from long to short, we need flight times going from short to long. Okay, so if we look at this athlete, this is Kate. Oh man, this is really hard to do from here when the screen's over there. We'll just play it, right? If we look at her early step here, right there is toe off, and like that, she is back on the ground. There's not wasted time. She is getting more momentum going forward right away. That early step is here pressing, and as soon as she hits toe off, that foot is already hammering back into the ground. So we are going from long to short ground contact times, and then short to long flight times. As the sprint progresses, one's going down, the other is going up. And then we see this gradual shift from more piston-like strikes where that foot is going back and forth in a linear line to more circular running patterns as it progresses, right? The next piece that I talk about with a kid is this idea of projection, right? If you think about the long line of the body going from the leg up through the head, we want to be projecting through that. This is one of the reasons I don't say that I need you to drive forward, because a lot of kids here drive and they go, stay low, and then they run like this and they fall down for a few steps, right? We talk a lot about I need you to project forward and get your momentum going that way. And then with each step, that angle of projection gets a little higher and a little more vertical. So this one's driving out at about a 45-degree angle. Now we're a little bit more upright, right? So we talk about, I need you to project forward, and as that pressure builds, in order to stay ahead of it, eventually it's become more vertical in nature, right? And then the other piece that we're watching for all the time in these early phases of acceleration is that this shin angle should match the angle of the torso, right? We don't want kids coming forward and then stepping out there. That's a symptom that they're catching themselves, right? They've come out at too steep of an angle and they're falling down, right? So typically with that kid, I'm not gonna talk about like, oh, I need you to like stand up, because then they're gonna be like, all right, I'm gonna do it, coach. I'm gonna do exactly what you said because I'm a good athlete. And then they don't project forward and build up any pressure. So we talk about, no, I just need you to project a little less forward and a little more up, okay? And then again, you can see in these early steps, if we think about this long line of the body, right? As this foot recovers, it's not going back behind that long line, right? It comes straight forward and up, still not violating that long line, still not violating that long line, and just right there on step 4-ish, the foot is starting to make more of a circular action, right? So those first 3 to 4 steps, very piston-like in nature, going back and forth. Only later does it become a little bit more circular. So we've made it through acceleration, we're into an upright mechanic. This piece right here is where I spend quite a bit of my time, right? There are lots of positions in here, right? Max, there's 5 positions here. I'm gonna focus on the most important 2, and then I'll touch on a couple things, right? So here at toe off, right? The instant the toe is about to leave the ground, I'm looking for 2 really, really big things. One, And I hope you can see okay. If not, we're all gonna go back to the YouTube video and we're gonna watch this a little closer. Or we're gonna go to the slides and we're gonna look at it a little closer there. Zoom way in. We want the toe of that lead leg to be just under the knee, right? We don't want it out here at toe off because you're asking for hamstring issues. We want it to be right under the knee. A little bit ahead is okay, right? A little bit behind is okay, but more or less directly under the knee. And then this back leg, we want to be incompletely extended, right? We don't want full extension of the hip, knee, and ankle. The foot should leave the ground vertical. If I'm over pushing here, I'm gonna create problems for myself. And I'll get into that in a minute because we'll get to watch one of my athletes creating problems for herself because I'm a good coach, right? So this is important. I'm looking for toe under the knee and incomplete extension of this leg. And if I were to say a third thing, I'd say a nice upright torso, okay? This is maximum vertical projection. We're not gonna get into that very much. Essentially what's important is this is the highest point in their run, right? They've left the ground. This is where they're at. They're about to come back down to take their next step. Strike is getting ready for the next step. We're not gonna worry a ton about that. This is the other position I look at super closely. This is touchdown, right? So the instant that next step touches the ground, I'm looking for a few key landmarks. I'm looking for these knees to be together. I shouldn't see separation between the knees, right? If there's separation where this leg is recovering and this leg is still in front, I've got an athlete who's overstriding and falling down. That's gonna create problems at the board, okay? So I'm looking for the knees to be together or for this recovery to be slightly ahead. The other piece that I'm looking for is for that heel to be just under the knee and for the shin to be vertical, right? I don't want to be contacting out here because that's begging for hamstring and shin splints, right? I want to be right about there, okay? And then full support, I often just call this figure 4 position, right? Because the legs make a 4 and it makes more sense to my athletes than full support. I don't know, they're probably smarter than me, so I should just go with what they make sense with. So here's my athlete. This woman is a 17.5-foot long jumper, and she did it a foot behind the board because I just can't stabilize her running mechanics to save my life. But she's got springs, right? Here's her stuff. So if we look at toe off and we work our way backwards, remember when I talked about, all right, toe under the knee, that looks pretty good. This toe has gotten a little bit ahead of the knee. Incomplete extension of the leg, that's pretty good. This one has gotten pretty darn extended, right? So we're already starting to see some asymmetry here. There's a problem. This leg seems to do okay. This leg seems to really over push, and she has to split this leg forward to try and counter that falling. If we work our way backwards, here's her maximum vertical projection, here's her strike, here's touchdown, and I know it's hard to see, especially if you're in the back, but we're starting to see a gap form in the knees. It's a small one. It's not like she's landing like this, right? But she's lagging a little behind. And you can see in her upright posture, that over push has tipped her forward. So she's going into the board already falling down. It's minute, but it becomes extremely important later, right? So the next piece that we're gonna talk about is these final 4 steps. This is the transition phase. This might as well be titled The Lesson That John Learned the Hard Way 8 times, right? Because I seem to forget it every time I have a good athlete. They come in, here's full support, maximum vertical projection, blah, 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 blah. And then you come in, your penultimate is a slight dip and lowering into full takeoff, into full toe off. This is just the undulation of your center of mass, and it's just a nice, smooth continuation and transition into right there. So I shouldn't see any issues or any big changes to max velocity sprinting right here, right? It should look the same. Nice incomplete extension, toe behind the knee, blah, blah, or under the knee, stuff like that. What I see frequently, and what I mess up all the time, is I get a kid coming in, and she goes straight up and straight down into the sand, and looks at me and goes, I thought I really jumped. And I'll look at her jump mechanics, and I'll go, I really think you jumped too. It looks perfect. The problem is further upstream. This is where 4 steps out should have been, but instead of having good short flight times in the early steps, she bounded. Now she's way past where she should be 4 steps out, and she's had to scrunch her steps up, right? And now the undulation, instead of being here and being a nice smooth progression, we get a progression from up and down really fast, and then surprise, surprise, the takeoff follows that same path that we have set, and you go up high and you crash back down, right? We see the same thing happening with the person that's too far away, right? They were the sewing machine at the beginning of their run. They went up and down really fast, and then they didn't really go anywhere, and then they're shocked that they're 2 feet behind their mid-mark, 4 steps out, so they have to stretch to find the board. And then, surprise, surprise, this flattening of the curve has created a flattening of the jump. Their jump mechanics right here are great. They're doing everything right, but their body is traveling the wrong wavelength at that point. So it doesn't matter. So this right here, I'm working this mark really, really hard. If we're doing our approach rehearsals, I'm going to the track and I'm watching them run 16 steps, and you know, some other athlete can watch where their takeoff is. I don't care. I'm watching where is their mid-mark 4 steps out when they're just thinking about running, when they're not thinking about jumping yet, when they're not thinking about trying to find a board. And I'm getting that down so that when we go to the runway, I know exactly where they're going to be if they're not interrupting their sprint mechanics. Okay? So now we're to the good stuff. Let's talk about actually jumping.
Is that a mark that they're aware of?
Yes, that's a mark that I make sure that they're aware of, but that's not one that I have them watching as they come down the runway, right? So there's no mark there where they come in and they're like, I hit the cone, I nailed it, time to jump. That's too much of a distraction as they come in.
So it's more for you really to talk about after.
It's certainly in competition, it's more for me. During practice, especially in those early phases, I might put that cone down and say, when you cross the cone, I don't want you to worry about getting faster. I just want you to worry about holding that speed and staying nice and upright. So early phases, it might be there. Certainly later phases, it's not. Make sense? Okay. So as I come in here, we're gonna, well, a couple things. I'm gonna use a lot of words to describe positions that I'm looking for. I want to emphasize these words that I'm using and talking about with you all are not the words that I use with my athletes. Right? We are going to talk about specific positions. Now, if you're telling an athlete to hit a bunch of positions, I really believe you might as well be tying their shoes together, right? They're going to be hitting landmarks and they won't be moving. We got to coach movements. So I coach a lot of, hey, make sure that spine is long, make sure you're feeling that hip pressure forward, and make sure that takeoff foot is coming down from above, okay? Those are the intents that I'm coaching. What I actually see doesn't always look like the words that I'm telling them to feel. Okay? So here's her coming into her penultimate step. So this is her third to last step. Good incomplete extension, toe under the knee, nice and upright. She's nailing it. Comes into her penultimate step. That moment looks an awful lot like touchdown when you're just running naturally. Right? Knees are together, torso is upright, shin is vertical. The only difference is that this is a whole-footed, rolling heel-to-toe contact. Most athletes that I work on don't need to think about that, right? But sometimes you do need to tell them that. I'm just nailing posture and pressure. Next, we come to this bridging, right? This is a tough one to explain with a slide, but essentially what I'm looking for is as they come through that penultimate, I should see this shin tip forward and then see bridging at the foot. And essentially what that means is, like, if this is their shoe, you should see it kind of bending like that, right? That tells me that they're keeping pressure forward. They're not just letting off of that pressure and going, oh, time to jump, right? They're actually running through their takeoff. So this is a kind of a classic spot. I can't feel what they feel. But if I see that bridging, I'm gonna go ahead and guess that they feel that hip pressure pretty well. And if I don't see that bridging, I'm gonna say, hey, your run kind of sounds like this. And you're letting off that pressure. I need you to come in, boom, boom, boom. Okay? So These are the places where I'm starting to talk about, oh, right here, I need a long spine. I need you not to be like this. Right here, I need you to keep that pressure forward. And then you'll see right there, we want that foot to be hammering down from above. Okay? So this, again, subtitle this slide, Mistakes John Made for Years. I got super confused because I would see this posture here or this posture here and go, oh, they're blocking into the board, they're slowing down. We don't want that. We do want this, right? Her intent is hammering that foot down. The hip is moving towards the ground. This moment where it looks like she's leaning back, to me that's desirable because the body is summoning tension so that when it hits the board and it's rising off of that penultimate, it's not loose and full of slack so that their hip dumps off this way and they get bucked sideways, right? So that lean back is their body summoning the tension to survive the jump. I'm looking for that lean back, and as they come forward, right, here's my hinge moment, it's gonna start tipping me. That knee's gonna yield a little bit, and then it's gonna spring her forward into a nice upright jumping posture. Generally, if right here she's got an upright posture and not a slightly reclined one, I see her already falling down right there. So if we talk about key landmarks, we're going back to our really good long jumper. Toe off, pretty good, right? More or less what I'm looking for. Incomplete extension, toe more or less under the knee. Penultimate touchdown, knees are together, foot is nice and flat, spine is fairly long. She's a little bit more lean forward than I would love to see. We're seeing bridging right there, so she's keeping that pressure forward. Takeoff touchdown, fairly well reclined. Takeoff looks good. Right here, just as the knees come together, we see she's still just a little bit reclined in the air. Just the littlest bit, right? That's desirable. It looks like to me, her torso is a little more upright than I would like it to be. Probably because right here, it was a little bit upright and she couldn't quite get it to the posture that we want. So we would frequently have meets where she went into the sand like that. Just like she's sitting in a chair going and standing up. And we'd sit there and be like, oh my God, her landing, it's crazy. And we'd be like, oh, we gotta do landing drills. My landing is all over the place. Well, no, your takeoff is all over the place, right? You're too upright right here. And then the telltale sign of that, right? We wanna be a little more reclined with a nice long line of the body. Her chest arches forward like that. If they're doing that in the air and pushing their chest forward instead of their hips forward, that's a pretty clear sign that there's something misaligned at the board. Okay, so I'm always looking for like, here's what it looks like when you're right, but that chest puff is a clear indicator that something is wrong right here, and they're probably not creating enough tension and keeping that pressure forward with the hips as they approach the board. And then you'll notice, like I said, she's pretty much straight up and down there when we would rather be a little bit reclined still in the air. So of course she's going in like that. She's got no choice. Either she goes in like that, or she rides this out a little longer and does a front somersault into the sand. Right? And she's told me before that she's done that. So she's trying to avoid embarrassment. I get that. I wouldn't want to do that either. So a lot of times, and we see this again, these problems are being manifested further upstream in the run, or being created further upstream in the run. Here's my check engine light. Just because my check engine light came on doesn't mean I gotta replace a light bulb, right? I gotta go fix the problem. So here's where we get into the training piece of it, and we're gonna have to hustle a little bit because, like I said, I put too much in here. But here's where I think one of the more interesting things I've stumbled across, because we're thinking about training speed. Here is the athlete's age in years. This axis is their speed, right? Their max velocity. Right here, elite men. Right here, elite women. General population men. General population women. Athletes, whether elite or general population, are all naturally getting faster at pretty steep rates. Until, let's see here, for most women, it is their mid to late teens, depending on when they kind of finish puberty. For most boys, it's their early to mid 20s. They're just naturally getting faster. Elite athletes are peaking still at about the same times. The only difference is they hold on to it for longer. What happens here to help them hold on to it for longer? Training. That's it. So what we can recognize from that is that our job is to monitor the training and avoid interrupting that development with too much work. This is one of my big things, right? Been around a lot of programs where, okay, it's time to hammer speed. It's time to go out and do blah, 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 pick your thing. That's actually very counterproductive to my mind. They are naturally getting faster, and if I overtrain them at this age, I just took that curve that could have peaked up here and flattened it out so it's peaking lower, right? They don't get that time back. They just don't. So we need to make sure that we are not overworking them, right? And then as we monitor, we start noticing, oh, is Brittany's development starting to slow a little bit? She's not getting faster like she used to. Now we intervene with training, right? And I want to be really clear. I'm not saying a kid can go from the couch playing Fortnite to a sub-11 sprint, right? That's a ridiculous thing to claim. What we need to do is expose them to speed so that they can go practice that skill. The distinction I would make, and here's the English teacher, right? We want them to play speed, not train speed. Give them opportunities to run as fast as they can. Challenge them to be a little faster. Get them out competing. Get them competing against each other a little bit in practice. Do chase drills, right? We're okay. This kid's going out, run them down, right? Let them play speed and give an opportunity to do that instead of hammering them with, all right, we're gonna do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then if you're still feeling okay at the end, we're gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, I think we just interrupted some speed development there, right? Or we went in the weight room and we squatted super duper heavy and the kid's 15 and he squats like this, right? We just interrupted speed development. We don't get that time back. So teach them the habits of good sprinting, let them play speed. Here's how I do it, right? I think it's a pretty simple system, but I know it doesn't work for everybody. Monitor however you want to, but what I'm doing is I'm taking, okay, what is the smallest dose of training I need to do and still see them getting faster? So I'm timing their 30-meter sprint, and I've got little cones up at 5, 10, 15, 20, and I'm just watching them go by, right? And then I look at that and go, all right, are they getting faster? Is this date showing improvement from that date? Or is this date showing improvement from that date? Sorry. Or have we slowed a little bit? Is there toothpaste in the tube anymore? Or do I need to go searching elsewhere for toothpaste? All right, how are all these qualities interacting? Have I maxed out what I can get with speed play? Is it time for me to start pushing down harder on plyos? Is it time for me to start pushing down harder on weight training? We don't know, unless we're watching and paying attention. The beautiful thing about track is if they're a 100-meter sprinter, we're testing every week, right? Here's the other way I do it. So I set it up in our little gym. It is way less crowded right now because this girl couldn't be at a normal practice time, but normally it's packed through there. There's the start line. I've got cones at 5, 10, 15, 20, 20-ish. I had to kind of adjust it because of the camera pan. And all I did is take an iPad, right? I didn't spend $5,000 on a fancy training system. I didn't get some free lab, whatever, who cares, right? I've got an iPad where I literally stand there, say, okay, when you're ready, go. She goes, I film it, I hit the timer reset button on Holo Technique or on my sprint, and then I just scroll by and watch her go, right? And I get my splits right there. It takes a little bit more time than like free lab, but every school's got iPads lying around at this point, I think, right? So I'm doing that as often as I can, and then I'm looking at these things and asking myself, all right, where were their times from here to here to here? And where's their toothpaste in the tube? So I see this a lot, right? The football player comes in and they rock this first 10 meters because they've been hitting the weight room all year. Coach told me to lift, and I've been lifting. And then they drop off, right? I see this one a lot. I see a basketball player come in because all they do is bounce up and down on the court all day. I think we've all seen this. This is rough. Oof. But then once they get up to speed, watch out. This kid's coming for you, right? And then I see this one. I put a picture of a track athlete, and maybe it would have been more fitting for me to put a picture of a unicorn up there because this is the kid, every school has one, right? Where, oh yeah, that's Jared. He's the fastest kid in the school. He's never done track, right? Thus perpetuating the illusion that baseball is the most athletic sport that takes no athleticism. So we get Jared here, right? And you're trying to get that kid out for track, and you just won't do it because like, oh no, I gotta play baseball. But then, sophomore year comes and they cut him because he's, quote, not that good, right? Then we scoop him up. And this is the kid that is a mess here, is a little better here, but then really starts to live here at 20 to 30 meters. Truly, he probably lives, instead of here at 20 to 30, he's probably over here at like 40. But we gotta ask ourselves, all right, what does our unicorn need? Where's their toothpaste? Well, no one's pressed down here lately. Maybe he needs some heavy sled work. Right? No one's pressed down here lately. Maybe he needs some plyos. What about my football player? Well, there's not much toothpaste left there anymore. Maybe he needs some light sleds and some plyos. Maybe he needs some of what Jared's done, where he's just tried to run fast his whole life. So he's, this kid's maybe working over here, doing some max velocity stuff. And here's what I see. Even though this is only 30 meters and his max speed's maybe over here at 40, I still see that bleeding down in my data. I see them, when they get to here, they're not stagnating at the same speed, they're still getting faster. That's telling me, oh, you've gotten faster, even if I didn't measure it because it was over here outside my cone setup. So here's how I think about going through this training process. I'm thinking about it in terms of narrowing the funnel, right? I've got athletes that are starting in fairly disparate qualities with acceleration work and upright mechanical stuff and general principles of jumping, and then we're working our way towards that full approach competition jump. And I've got a couple months to do that, and they gotta be ready. So I slowly bring them along, right? We've gone from general acceleration and upright work where we're not running fast, but we're running up the stairs or something. Well, the snow has, pray to God, the snow has melted, right? Maybe you're getting outside on the track to do some max speed work finally. You're moving somewhere in here from general principles of jumping to very short approach jumps. We're doing approach rehearsals. We're doing slightly less short approaches where we're talking maybe 10 or 12 steps. And we're doing some troubleshooting in those early meets. And then, oh by God, I hope he's ready because it's time, right? Usually they're ready, right? May's a nice time, the weather's good, and they're just feeling better. So here's how I think about it. Here's your early season training, the first 2 to 3 weeks, or to me, this was the time that I was like, track has started. Look forward to seeing that track in about a month, right? You're in the gyms, you're in the hallways, you're in the wrestling room, you're just trying to be somewhere and get some training in. Again, another mistake John has made and continues to make year after year, even though I know better, don't blow them up in week 1. Yes, I'm mad they didn't train in the off season. Yes, I see all the potential they could have had that they were less likely to realize, but there's a 0% chance of them realizing it if they get hurt in the first week, right? It's week 1 and I'm mad, so you're coming out of this with shin splints. And then I'm gonna be dealing with shin splints for a whole year, or you're gonna quit. Neither of which helps me, right? So all we're doing is we're preparing the muscles and tendons for more intense work later, and we're teaching this as our opportunity to teach. Again, former teacher. I see this as teaching time and preparation time. So here's what I'm looking at. Here are 2 ways that I schedule that early season week, right? I might do 3 days of training a week, right? 3 hard days. If they need a little more recovery, which they might, a lot of kids do, I do 2 hard days, and then I fill that in with easier technique, very easy technique, and then easier technique again, right? Depends on the kid. Depends on how much recovery they need to stay healthy, but I better not be giving them shin splints in weeks 1 and 2, because it's gonna be a long season for both of us otherwise, right? Monday, what I like to do, if it's a 3-day model, is I'm working on unresisted acceleration. We're sprinting down the halls, maybe we're in the gym and we're just doing repeat 10s, right? After that, I'm doing modified speed, I'm doing stair runs, hill sprints, dribbles in the gym, whatever gets them thinking about upright posture and hammering that foot down from above without beating them up too much, right? Stairs are nice because it gets you thinking I need to put my foot down. It also restricts how fast and how hard you can come after this, right? Then on Friday, I'm doing acceleration work. Maybe if I'm lucky, I've got a sled with some carpet underneath it so that I can go across the gym and no one's gonna yell at me. Or I've definitely had my desperate moments where I go, okay, I'm bringing a beach towel and I'm grabbing a bumper plate from the weight room and we're just pushing it across the gym, right? And we're just working on projecting, right? Here, same idea, except I bailed on this one and I've maybe slid that into one of my technique days where, hey, we're gonna do a couple stair runs and then we're gonna go do some skips or something, right? Acceleration, resisted acceleration. Here are some, and this is one of those like, don't try and see the slide now, just look it up later. Here are some of my early season speed ideas. And what I wanna draw your attention to is not the specific workouts, but the way we're cueing, right? Everything we've talked about has a place in this early season. These unresisted sprints are great opportunities for me to talk about long to short ground contact times, for me to talk about short to long flight times, for me to talk about the rising of the hips as the projection angle gets bigger, because they can feel it, right? If I'm doing a plate push across the gym, they probably shouldn't stand taller, right? That's gonna mess me up. But the resisted sprints are a fantastic time for me to talk about projection and help them to understand, get your body projecting forward. It's a fantastic time for me to talk about pressure, because if they're dragging a sled and they are not working the ground and flight time ratio quite right, they're gonna feel it, right? The sled is a better teacher than I will ever be, which is really disconcerting, right? Because I got a master's degree and I still suck at this. And then the stair sprints, like I said, is a great opportunity to work on the upright mechanic without the wear and tear that comes from max velocity sprinting. Here is my bang for buck, early season technical stuff, right? Lots of skips for height, because this is a perfect place for me to work on long spine, right? Tell them, I need you to get the top of your head as high as you can. They're gonna draw that spine up and they're gonna work on that good jump mechanic. The other piece that I'll talk about is a high hip and a low knee. Classic mistake that a kid makes is they get their knee high and they mistake that for jumping high, right? Here's a nice skip for distance. This is a great place to work on hip pressure, because if they're doing it right, their torso stays steady. If they're doing it wrong, you're gonna see a lot of this, right? So we work skips for distance, work on that long spine and that hip pressure forward so that they're not all wobbly. This is a great foot plant from above, right? You need to push down to go over that hurdle. The repeated takeoffs can be hard for a kid to figure out, so we put hurdles there to help them, like take a step and jump, take a step and jump. Be smooth and calm and a little reclined while you're in the air. And then we move that into a run, jump, which is just 4 steps with a nice low amplitude jump where we work on keeping that pressure, keeping that spine long, and I might add a little bit of like a come around for a high five as they're doing it. So they're starting to work on what the arms are doing. Even if they don't have a ton of flight time, they can still come around for a high five. I hate name droppers, but one time Carl Lewis bullied me and he was insistent that the most important thing you could do was come around for that high five. Said that's all he ever thought about was just take off, come around for a high five. And I was like, yeah, maybe when you're running 12 meters a second, that's all you need to think about. But and then he just disappeared. It was crazy. Suddenly he was all the way across the gym. Still got it. All right. So mid-season. This is where, all right, the track is visible, but it's slick, right? Weather got in the way. We want to carefully progress our intensities, but in addition to that, we want to balance recovery, right? Because I had a great mentor who would always talk about, I drink whiskey and I drink water. Water because it's good for me, and whiskey because it gets the job done quick. And I said, that's great, but like we're talking about long jump. And he would go, we are. And I'd, oh, thanks, right? Either it's hard or it's easy. Get out of that middle zone, okay? The middle zone isn't hard enough to get you a ton better, but it is hard enough to beat the crap out of you. So in a second here, I'll show you what that looks like. And then in terms of their technical development, we're starting to progress to longer approaches. In my mind, I'm just trying to get them to 12 steps. Once they can get to 12 steps, great. Take it back to full approach, because I have a lot of my data is kind of showing that most of my women are 95% full speed by 20 meters, which is about 66 feet. right? So once they can do that, it's not that big of a difference to go further. They can handle that jump versus going from 6 to 8 steps, significant speed differences. 8 to 10, significant speed differences. And then there's that early season meet where we're doing our troubleshooting. So here's what I'm looking at. Here's how I'm going through my week. I'm going, all right, I got to meet Thursday or I got to meet Saturday. Well, I got my pre-meet on Wednesday, whatever that might be, which leaves me with 2 days to work with. Well, Tuesday I'm going to sneak some technique in there. Monday I'm going to do more acceleration that might take the form of approach rehearsals. I'm going to slide some multi-jumps in there. Maybe we're doing some skips for height, skips for distance kind of stuff. I'm going to sneak my lift in, whatever. Day after the meet, they're probably all beat up, so we might do some easy circuits. I might lift them if they're feeling all right. But I never got my max speed day in there, right? There was no room. So I threw them in 100 and a 4x1 just because, all right, let's run fast. Let's play some speed here, right? We snuck the speed work in. It wasn't a tremendous volume, but it didn't matter. We did some approaches where we ran fast, right? Maybe we got 3 jumps. Maybe we made finals and got 6. Maybe there's no finals and you just did 4. And then we snuck some really fast sprinting in there. There it is. I just turned my meet into my training day. Simple enough. That eluded me up until, I don't know, a few years ago. So that's kind of what we want to be working on. That's what high school is so important for teaching us. Otherwise, my meet on Saturday, I might pre-meet. Oh, now I've got 4 days to work with. I can do a max velocity day, some sprints or some plyos, some lift. Easy recovery day, right? This is my water. These 2 right here, that's my whiskey. This moment right here, just starting to encroach on that middle zone, but just high enough to still get something out of it, okay? And then the meet is truly where the magic is happening. So here's kind of what my mid-season speed work looks like. I know it's gonna be hard to see from the back, but I'm introducing some variety to acceleration because my God, they are so freaking tired of 10, 20, 30, right? So, well, I don't know, we'll do a 10 from a crouch start, 10 from a 3-point start, 10 from blocks. Coach, I'm a jumper, I don't come out of blocks. You do today. Because they just need variety, and it helps them think about projection angles, right? We're rehearsing our full approach both on and off the runway, depending on where we are in the season. We're doing some max velocity. These bottom 3 are my favorite max velocity speed days, right? So we're talking some 40 to 60 meter sprints. We might do 6 flying 10s, and slowly, like the next week, we'll do 20s. The next week, maybe we do flying 30s. Or I might do some sprint float sprints. You'll notice what's most important here is it is very long recovery times. I'll have athletes constantly like, Coach, all I'm doing is running 80 meters. Do I really need 5 minutes of recovery? You do. Because your brain's gonna fatigue a lot harder than your muscles are. I've had kids say like, okay, well, whatever, I'll rest for 5 minutes. They get rep 2 in and they have to excuse themselves. And like, I don't feel well. I feel very foggy and I feel dizzy. Okay, take a few minutes, it'll be fine. When you're going really hard, it hits you way harder than you need to. And I've had well-meaning moments where I've gone, all right, let's go for it. Let's go for 6 of them. And we overcook it, and I set back their speed development because we overtrained, right? Less is more. Less is an awful lot more. This is another thing that was really important for me to figure out. I'm gonna start at the bottom and I'm gonna work my way back here. So when I was at Mounds View, True Team was the important meet of the year, right? I don't know how many schools here also think about it that way, but it meant that I had to have my kids' competition really ready by the first week in May, which isn't a big deal, right? We should be pretty competition ready at that point. But I found that it takes about 3 meets worth of troubleshooting before they're actually competition ready, right? This first meet, that's the one where they just can't find the board to save their life, right? They are all over the place. This second meet, that's the one where they follow the big one. Just seems to happen every year. They launched one, they nailed it, and they were that far over the board, and can you just freaking help me out, you know, parent of a 15-year-old? Like, you are killing me here, right? And then this is the one where we get small little, like, oh, I PR'd by an inch, right? We start getting inklings that something's happening. This is the one where things start really going. Maybe they don't get the monster PR, but you're getting close. And the troubleshooting that happens at this meet, or these meets, I can't train that. I can't delay this moment. because I have to see what falls apart under the pressure of competition. And I can't replicate that in practice. So we gotta go there, we gotta fall apart a little bit, and then I gotta learn some lessons for the next week. All right, and then if we scale it backwards, we start noticing a steady progression. I often use this, just get it to a B- and move on. If I spend all day waiting for them to be technically perfect, we will never get to technically perfect. You don't get stronger by lifting the same weight every single day. You gotta go up a little bit of weight and struggle. Adding a little bit more speed is where you increase the struggle. The day you get better is the day you come in at about C- work, and then you drag yourself back to a B-. Then maybe you sleep on it for the weekend and you come back on Tuesday and your 8-step looks great now. Did you train over the weekend? No. But your body figured it out. It slept on it for a minute. So, a couple quick pieces. I know we're coming up on time. I'm gonna blast through this, and we're all gonna reference the slides later if we want to know more. Though I wouldn't blame you if you don't want to know more at this point. Here are my big things in main competition season. I'm avoiding neural confusion and motor interference. And what I mean by that is, once I go to full approach, I never touch that again in practice ever. Once they are locked into that competition, adrenaline-fueled way of jumping, I can't replicate that. So if I do that in practice, I'm doing something that's just hard enough to be fatiguing, but just different enough to confuse them. So I had an athlete a few years ago who literally was at a meet, and she was talking to one of her competitors, and she just, I'm really nervous. I didn't do a lot of full approach this week in practice. And my athlete's sitting there like, I haven't done full approach in 2 months. Should I be worried? No, you're fine, right? I'm working on sharpening acceleration and max velocity. I'm treating practice as an opportunity to rehearse communication. What fell apart in the last meet? Now let's go back to practice. We're gonna do some short approach jumps that are very different cognitively for the athlete. And we're gonna rehearse, all right, last time we weren't doing a great job keeping our spine long. As we came into the board, we were starting to bend over. So we're gonna work on that. And when you get to the meet, you're gonna know what I mean. You're gonna have that idea already in your head. So we've rehearsed communication, and then we've periodized some of our cues. And what I mean by that is I've noticed over the years, and I think most of us have noticed this, cues have like a shelf life of about 2 weeks, maybe 3, where they do something, you cue them to fix it, they fix it, and then 2 weeks later, it's broken, you say the exact same thing, and it doesn't work this time. And I don't know why, other than cues just seem to expire. So what I'm thinking about is when I'm about 2-ish weeks out from my most important competition, I'm picking some new cues, right? And we're hitting those, and we're making sure that shelf life doesn't expire by the big meet. All right, here's my main comp training week. The big thing that you're gonna take away from whiskey, it's compete or easy or hard. Nothing in between, right? Work hard, recover, work hard. Last thing that I'm gonna leave you with. This was my most important piece when I was coaching high school. I'll wrap this up, I know we're about to go over. This rollover cycle, right? These cycles that I showed you of a way to schedule your week are great until you get a random blizzard. And cuss, right? Like this week just turned into a complete cluster cuss. What you do is you take 3 days and you take your key performance indicators, so acceleration, technique, max velocity, whatever. The body has about 10 days where you need to get these 3 workouts in. And if you can get them in about 10 days, you're gonna continue growing. Put them wherever you want, as long as there's a day between them, maybe 2. So if I'm planning on this on Monday and then I show up on Monday and it's a thunderstorm, I just move this to Tuesday. Right? I wait a couple days and then I do day 2. 3 workouts in 10 days is a lot more recovery than 3 workouts in 7 days. Right? So I use this all the time at my level where I have indoor facilities to sharpen for championships. Oh, you're still sore from Monday? We won't do that workout today. We'll go do something else. Fool around with the med ball. I use this for rehabbing athletes when they're coming back from any kind of injury. I use this for early season training when I can't predict the weather. And then I use this to learn how to manipulate the rhythms of an athlete's body, right? I start realizing oh, Aiden needs 2 days to come back from a workout that's difficult. but Danny comes back from it really quickly, right? So you might be inviting a little bit of chaos into your life. It's worth it.